Hello, and welcome to my channel. I am Damien Marie Adhope. In the simplest terms, I am an atheist, humanist, philosopher, and prehistorical writer researcher at DamienMarieAdhope.com. I am specifically an axiological atheist. An axiological atheism can be thought to involve ethical and value theory reasoned and moral argument driven apatheism, agnosticism, atheism, anti-theism, anti-religionism, secularism, and humanism. Axiological atheists can be understood as a value theory or a value science atheist. As an axiological atheism's ethically reasoned and constructive pro-humanity. I am an axiological thinker, value theorist. The science of goodness, worthiness, usefulness, valuableness, virtue, reliableness, accuracy, validity, morality, integrity, beneficialness, etc., etc. We axiologists have a value consciousness. And in general, we see the architecture of humanistic humanitarianism value in people that we see as dignity beings. Places and things are not. Axiology is a value theory. In its broadest sense, it involves areas of philosophy that are deemed to encompass some evaluative or evaluation aspect. Therefore, it crosses almost all domains in some way or another. Now for a more detailed terms as to what I am. I am an axiological atheist, an anti-theist, an anti-religionist, secularist, humanist, rationalist, writer, artist, poet, philosopher, advocate, activist with schooling in psychology, sociology, as well as I am an autodidact, self-taught in science, archaeology, anthropology, and philosophy. I promote science and am against pseudoscience, pseudohistory, pseudomorality, things that are found in religion. I support realism, axiology, of course, liberty, justice, ethics. I am also an anarchist socialist. I support anarchism and socialism, progressivism, liberalism, philosophy, psychology, archaeology, and anthropology, advocating for sexual, gender, child, secular, LGBTQIA+, race, class rights, and equality. So if you can guess from all that, I support or challenge that I have an eclectic variety of videos on a variety of topics. Please take time to check them out, as well as if you enjoy them, please give them a like. And don't forget to subscribe, as new things are on their way all the time for my channel.
I'm the state director for Atheists for Washington State. So for you have a whole bunch of handout material for it. If you haven't heard of American Atheists before, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, kind of a government watchdog, kind of encompass it. And what we do is make sure that the absolute separation between church and state is held in the highest regard. So currently in your state of Washington, there are several bills, and Senate bills and House bills that are of concern, and there are mitigating bills for that. Currently, as you know, there is a measles epidemic here in Washington State. I see a lot of you shaking your head. So, as it stands right now, Washington State has...
Well, autisms. I had to say it. Come on now, I had to say it.
So currently right now, Washington State actually has a bill that protects faith-based exemptions for vaccinations, and that is the loophole that a lot of these people are using. But they're also using faith-based exemptions for things like blood transfusions and organ donation and life-saving interventions. And one of the issues is affecting children and vulnerable adults who have no ability to consent. And that is where we are trying to fix that. Now, I don't have this memorized, but currently on the docket right now, there is, hold up here, it is, oops, wrong email. There it is. Okay, so we have HB 176 is concerning the faith-based exemptions regarding criminal mistreatment of children and vulnerable adults. Now, yes, and so that's right now, that's one of the things that they're trying to push. I spoke with Representative Steve Kirby. I spoke with a few other, District 27, I'm trying to remember her name. Spoke with Governor Inslee's office, and also spoke with Senator Patty Murray's office about all of these things, trying to get them to push. Now, we got several state senators and state representatives to sign on it. Currently, unfortunately, and I don't know why, it seems to be a hot button issue on both, for some reason, both sides of the aisle are almost refusing to kind of endorse this. And I'm trying to wrap my head around this because I bring up, like, we have a measles epidemic, something that we had deemed eradicated in the United States in 2006. There's no reason for this to be here, but yet here it is. And where we see the outbreaks of these are in some of the most religious areas, and they have in some places up to 80% non-vaccination rates. And what they are using as caveats to get their kids into public school is these religious exemptions. And it's amazing how prolific it is. So if you would look these up, contact your representatives and tell them, hey, as your constituent, I would like you to please endorse these. Contact Governor Inslee's office because he's all up in arms about this. He's actually keeping a tally currently right now. I spoke with their office on Wednesday, and they were keeping a tally on this. So voice your concern. Let them know that this bill does exist. There's a state bill and a House bill. I spoke with also Congressman Denny Heck about this also on Wednesday, asking if we could somehow get some sort of federal mandate introduced. So I will, if you guys want to email me, if you guys got a pen, I do have an actual official email at atheist.org, or you can just look me up. I'm Assistant State Director. So just DF, oops, sorry. So, yep. So DFBENNETT at atheists.org. So that's one of the things that we're trying to currently plug away at right now. Now there are other things that we have been kind of focusing on here and there. Currently it's in Ferndale, I think it was. There was a teacher who was utilizing social studies as a way to proselytize. If you hear about those kinds of incidences, let me know. And I will jump right in on that, and I will handle it for you guys. That's what I'm doing. That's what I do. So, you know who I am now. I'm glad you guys showed up. And I don't want to take Mr. Adhope's time up anymore. So, may I present to you Mr. Damien Adhope.
Hi, I'm Damien Adhope, and I'm an axiological atheist, which is a value theory or a value in science atheist. I personally am a value theorist since I'm not good at doing math. You have to do math to do the scientific axiology. Anyways, I'm going to give you my understanding of religion evolution. And it includes the stages of animism, totemism, shamanism, paganism, and progressive organized religions. So, pre-Animism, before religion, to me starts about 300,000 years ago. I'm just going to go real quick through all of them, and then I'm going to explain more. Animism is about 100,000 years ago in Africa, and Totemism is about 50,000 years ago in Europe, and basically Spain and France. And then Shamanism is from Siberia, and it's about 30,000 years ago. And paganism is about 12,000 years ago from Turkey, and progressed organized religion I see is starting in Egypt, since they formalize their religion. Some people think it's Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia, to me, copied what Egypt did. Mesopotamia is different. They started the city-states, but not the country. The country idea of it all under one thing is an Egyptian idea. And to me, when that happens, see, Mesopotamia had multiple deities from multiple cities. But Egypt said, no, our whole country, in a sense, north and south, will be under one system. And that, to me, is when you get organized religion. Anyways, I'll explain everything more. So, and then current world religions, where we kind of think of today, are under 4,000. And we can trace atheist doubt to at least by 2,600 years ago. And so it all starts in a general way with animism, or a theoretical belief in supernatural powers and spirits, or as I say, a spirit-filled life or afterlife. And when we say, what I say, a spirit-filled life, what I mean is that all of life is full of spirits. In other words, that they have things like plant people or plant spirits, and they have rock people or rock spirits. So the difference, like, you can think of it, if an animist makes something, it's more like it already was there, they just help bring it out to them. A little different than Totemism that sees themselves as more controlling of nature, where animism is more like a hippie-ish, they live in nature, or they're one with nature. In fact, I've seen an animist in a show go out and hunt for food using a lion, but not killing them, having no weapon, and yet coming back with food. Amazing. They basically wait till the lion has caught something, they wait till it's eaten a certain portion, and they slowly walk up. The lion leaves. They take only a portion. That way the lion knows next time it can leave without having to do any violence, because they're not going to take all that's killed. So they actually learn to work with nature. That's why I think it's ridiculous. People say that religion, which is animism in the beginning to me, started because of fear of lightning. Animists don't fear nature. They don't even fear lions. Come on. Because their mindset is they are one with nature. So they try to figure out how can we best work one with nature. Actually, it's commendable besides all the fantasy nonsense. So then this kind of an animistic idea was more physically expressed in Totemism, more of a theoretical belief in the mythical or magical power relationship with spirits through totems. Totems can be used in several different ways. I'm just trying to give you an overview. Okay, and then when this thing becomes fully enlisted and a full-time specific person needs to then do this, that's kind of when you get shamanism, which is in a sense a theoretical belief in the access or influence of spirits through rituals. And then you have a further employment of myths, and then deities added or gods added to all the above. So it's like Legos, boom, 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 boom. They just keep building on each other. There's a little variation in between, but in the general thing, it's just building on top of ideas. So then you have paganism, in a sense, which is a lot more still nature-based than a lot of the current world religions, generally, as I think of them. But it's also hinting close to their link, though, with these ancient later religions, which I think they all stem from. And so my hypothesis expressed an explanation of its building a theoretical house. One is the foundation, animism, and you're basically building the pieces up as you go. So think of it this way. All religious people are an animist. They're an animist plus, 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 plus. So if you believe in a spiritual life or afterlife, or you believe in souls or anything, that's an animist piece to the rest of the stuff you believe. Oops. So it seems that ancient people had to survive amazing threats in a dangerous universe. They used or tried to use superstition and perceived things as good and evil, harmful or beneficial. And the human immorality is imperfection later as the soul, which thought to affect the living, leading to what I call an ancestor worship, which I think is one of the oldest forms of religious worship. This ancestor worship presumably led to the belief in supernatural beings. And I think that happened probably, in a sense, in Totemism, because Totemism starts classifying things. So first you have spirits, and then you have a spirit that's for our clan. So it's like the grandmother spirit, the grandfather spirit is an ancestor. And then as the clan, in a sense, gets bigger, you need a more metaphorical clan ancestor, because you can't say my family. Although if you look at how, say, the places in England or Scotland or Ireland, they have like surnames that, in a sense, are larger than a family would have actually allowed. People are taking the name for a family they actually don't have a genetic connection to. But I think that goes back to the same thing as the ancestor worship. You had to have a larger, kind of a metaphorical ancestor for our whole clan that we all agreed to, in a sense. So that's when you're going a lot closer to God. You're moving out of the spirit realm because you're starting to make it no longer human, sort of metaphorical, more now said God, in a sense, or deities. So it's a progression to me. So Pre-Animism, the belief that objects contain, in a sense, probably a spiritual energy to them, in a sense, is a magical anthropomorphous thinking, and it possibly it relates to the form of ancestor worship or ancestor veneration, or just veneration of the dead. And so that's one of the things. And I think this is a primal stage that leads to animism. Animism is a belief in perceived spirit world, and like I said, it's possibly about 100,000 years old. And so Totemism, the belief in the perceived spirit worlds, can be maintained or created in the physical expression. Shamanism, the belief that a special person can communicate with these spirits on behalf of others through rituals. So, let's think about, when did the Bible say that all this stuff supposedly happened? Well, just to give you a frame of reference, basically the rabbinic tradition would be that it's about 5,770, something years ago. Yeah, not even close. Certainly closer to the nonsense, the belief that Christians often have of 6,000 years. That's probably where they get that from. Just showing you that that's the nonsense. So this is my art of Pre-Animism, and all those art of the stones are actual stones. They're not actual size. They're all about the size of like a large silver dollar or something. Some of those are kind of small. But the point is, some are a little bigger. But even have the one he's sitting on, that's an actual face, so an actual stone is just not that big. I just took creative license just to make it fun, but in a sense, they are making these faces. So, but I think it kind of starts when we start thinking more. And we start thinking more when we start eating meat. And there's evidence of 3.4 million years ago bones with cut marks made by stone tools in Ethiopia. And then 3.3 million years ago, in a sense, is one of the oldest technologies of stone tools. And then I have the evolution right here of the early stone tools. And so it starts at 3.3 million years ago, then the next jump is at 2.6 million years ago. And then the next jump is at 1.76 million years ago to 130,000 years ago. They kept this tool technology for a long time because it worked. So the first one is just kind of like a chipped stone. The second one is a little bit more modified, but still a bulky chipped stone. But that one is something totally different. To me, that's when also you start to get more symbolism start to happen, because they're making it thinner, they're making it in a certain specific shape over and over and over again for a long time. But let me show you even more. So they start out really big, some of them, and then they actually get smaller. So I think that's very interesting. And so there's the middle, like it says, Stone Age, from 300,000 to 50,000. You can see is a lot different than the early Stone Age. And then the later Stone Age of 50,000 to up to 10,000 is extremely different. So these alluvial stone tools, I think, as you can see, even themselves, the more primitive, the older ones, and then they start becoming a lot more expertise, but they keep a general shape. And I think this is important because to me this shows that when they pass the ideas, they're not just saying, hey, let's make a sharp rock. There's a lot more involved, and experimental archaeology has already showed that to make this type of stone tool, it takes a lot more than just watching someone do it one time. So Homo erectus, upright man, I have there depicted in my drawing with the actual size of the stone tool to a person holding it, just to show you that how big they actually were. But and I think that possibly the Homo erectus wasn't actually hunting. I think they might have been scavenging. Not too different though from the animus people that you can even see today, stealing food from the lions. I don't think that probably was that different. And so I think that they might have used these things actually just to get things that were already dead. But I don't know. But the important thing after that, though, really to me is 1.5 million years ago to 300,000 years ago, you have the use of fire. And I think with the use of fire and the control of fire, you're going to have some sacralization of fire itself. And I think this is important for the later ideas, because while we look at fire and only look at this, we're not looking at that. And I think up there is actually more important to them than down here. Up here you see these like little stars in the sky. And I think that this represents to them why people think that souls in a sense go up into the stars. And so to me, and in fact later for sure, stars become ancestors. But this is the problem too, is that Totemists don't see a difference between a human ancestor and a clan ancestor that's an animal. So if they say, well, the bull is me, or our clan, or our sign, they mean it is that their actual genetic, they think, connection. Even though we know that, obviously we don't come from animals. Well, we kind of do, but they're not bulls. So then there's a difference that 1 million years ago, okay, the control use of fire includes cooking. So we're actually having a big jump. Even today, if we eat raw foods, they did a study, and they found in Germany that people that eat raw foods, I can't remember how much, I think it was like a 50% loss in birth rate. It actually really affects our body. And I would say that when we started eating cooked food, it probably really affected our body. Probably in a positive way, since it seems to have a negative connotation when we start to go back to eating non-cooked food. So these to me are what I talked about earlier, this to people before I started. This has to do with, I think, basically like ancestor stones. And I think that it's probably iffy if it's anything supernatural. It's probably more like a headstone or like a grave marker. It means something, but I don't think it's a direct relation to the person. I'm not totally sure, but if you notice, they have like a couple of these have like the second to the last right there, or the fourth one, has two eyes open. The other ones, it's kind of one eye open, one eye closed type of theme. And I think that might be death and life. And so the first one here is about 300,000 years old from the Netherlands. Then the next one is from Africa, and it's anywhere from 800,000 to 300,000. Sometimes the reason that it's hard to tell the date is because they could be like in between the soil, and you know what the one soil is and the other one is, but if an item is somehow in between that, it makes it iffy. And they try to be accurate. So then the other one is from France, and it's 150 to 50. And the other one's 150 to 50, and both also from France. And then one from Germany, that's 200,000. So Homo erectus probably invented what we can think of as modern living. At least 750,000 years ago, in North Israel, evidence of social organization, communication, divided living, and working spaces, as well as must have built probably Homo erectus, shelters. And this is not a limited thing to them. Also in Tokyo, there's a 500,000-year-old living shelter, and then a 400,000-year-old shelter in France, and then a 350,000-year-old shelter in Germany. So this is what goddess worshippers like to call the oldest goddess, or the Alluvian goddess. Yeah, I don't buy it as a goddess at all. I would say this just connects to the Ancestor Stones, although, I will admit, that middle little dot is interesting, because it actually is a piece of stone wedged in there. So, did they make the hole and wedged in there? Did it form that way and they just modified the stone to highlight it? I don't know. It is interesting, and I would say that certainly it's starting to be more symbolic than just the faces. They're making a body, there's more going on. I still don't think that it's right to call this anything to me. I mean, close to a god or anything. I just think it has to do with these anthropomorphic, stone things that represent, probably ancestors. So these are basically 450 to 300,000 years ago, and you can see that it's not just stones. These are actually not even made of stuff that's that good to use as a tool. So this was directly just made to look like a thing for the whole reason of just making it look like a face. So progressed superstition. 430,000 years ago, in the pit of bones in Spain, seeming evidence of intentional storage of 28 individuals in a cave chamber pit, possibly a symbolic pseudo-womb. And a reddish quartzite tool that was unused was found on top of the body. Seems like a possible kind of a funeral rite, or possibly like an early cemetery. Or maybe a whole bunch of different people fell into a hole, far in a cave, and then somehow dropped an unused tool. All these people with only one tool. I don't know about that. So, because I hear sometimes people like, oh no, that can't be symbolic. Okay, make it make sense, because that your option doesn't really. Like there's another one too that I'll talk about. So this again shows you more of a reference, and the ones at the end, the 423 to 524, those are also little face stones. There's more than that too. In fact, there's more figure stuff than this. I just try to simplify it. So when did we come about, right? So Moroccan hominids, 350,000 years ago, the possible, suggest the Homo sapien lineage, possibly starts or, around this time. And I think it's really interesting because if we can think of ourselves far back, then thinking about these, what we think is special and different, we can see some of these, like I said, 300,000 or 400,000 artifacts is possibly not that outrageous, since our lineage goes back further than we realize. Oops. So this right here gives us an idea. 300,000 years ago, those North African skulls look a lot like us. And in a sense, they're shockingly similar, though, to almost to modern, human skulls. And they hold a combination of advanced and arcane features, suggesting these skulls may represent the very root of modern human species. Another interesting thing is that we always think that our brains are so much bigger. Well, I made a little chart with the brain sizes, so we don't get that confusion anymore. They're not that different. And then, even 100,000, when I think animism start, you can see it's a little bit more. So I can see where they went to jump from just kind of being superstitious, probably, to a more religious mind. I think the more the advanced our mind becomes, the more creative we get to how we think about the world. And then, at 10,000 years ago, the reason that the blue's in there, that's where we even got more. The brain didn't grow more, but the actual, stuff inside became more, evolved. What's interesting, that thing in the corner is a 300,000-year-old wolf-tooth pendant. So this symbolic nature of using items is also very old. This gives us a little idea of our interactions with other hominoid species. It's not a straight shot, one-time deal. We had a lot of interactions because guess what? Newsflash, sex is fun. And they didn't care who. So this is the one that some people start to say that it's not symbolic. So this is really deep in the cave, and these bodies are spread out. So they haven't yet found any sign of torches or fire. So it's a dark cave way at the bottom, and yet there's people down there. So they go, ha ha, it's not religion. I go, ha ha, where's the animal marks? They go, oh, well, maybe all these different people walked in there and died. Okay, let's assume that. How is that still not religion? What if they chose to die down there? It's multiple people. So multiple people are all going to, maybe it's an accident, maybe not. But it's very interesting how hard it is. You see the cave. They had to climb up and down and up, and to do what? Just to go in there, and your friend goes in, doesn't come back, and then you go in, and another friend goes in, another friend. And this other thing too is there's actually two branches of the cave. Both branches have bodies at the farthest thing. Accident? I think it's more of a jump to say it had to be not something than to think it is. Especially the fact that there's two separate, cave things, and they both have the bodies. But always stay open. So, getting a little more definite though, these three little pieces on top actually likely were for a whole necklace, and it's 200,000 years ago in northern Africa. And most likely, it was probably by a Neanderthal. So here, I've listed all the oldest evidence of modern humans, just to give you an idea that when we think of we come from Africa, it's not like we would come from one specific only place. A lot of times I hear that they say, oh, well, we're basically in East Africa. Well, you mean the lineage we have today stems from that. You don't mean our arcane, because it was more of a dispersal. So Neanderthals diverged from archaic humans about 500,000 years ago from the common ancestor, and several likely occurrences of inbreedings after that. Evidence of Neanderthal DNA is found in German caves expressing early inbreeding, dating back about 200,000 years ago, or more. More than 200,000 years ago, this prehistoric jaw was found in a cave in Israel. And then there's DNA evidence of inbreeding about 100,000 years ago from the Altai Mountains of Russia on the Mongolian border. An early modern human population left Africa much earlier and met with Neanderthals, possibly these moving from Europe towards the east sometime around 100,000 years ago. Anatomically, modern humans also migrated massively from Africa into the Middle East and later Europe, starting about 65,000 years ago. Now, speaking of what Neanderthals believed or may have believed, this I find to be extremely interesting. The fact that there's these 175,000-year-old rings, or I think it could be a possible chapel or sacred space of some kind, certainly is not just random. And the fact that they did this makes me think that they possibly, like my drawing, might have used it in a symbolic way. I don't know, but it certainly seems very interesting. So, the Neanderthal kind of Totemism, Animism, is from their technology. These claws right here are from a eagle, and they have holes in them, and they found at least one. I think it's 3, but at least one that has sinew, like wrapped around it, like it was used to tie onto something, or a necklace, or maybe it hang off of a pole. I don't know, but certainly they were using it in a symbolic way. And it's found in multiple sites, same behavior. Now, I think that this behavior relates to later, maybe even happened then, I don't know, but later behavior of what's called sky burials. It's basically when you let birds eat the flesh of your dead and then supposedly take them up to heaven. Which heaven actually, for them, is the stars. So the birds take it up to the sky. I don't know that they were doing that for sure then at 160, but for sure that leads to later the same kind of a behavior. So the first intentional barrier is not human. Neanderthals beat us to the punch. So 130,000 years ago is the earliest undisputed. Now the disputed possibly goes to 250,000 for Neanderthals, but it's iffy if it's the body was dropped and then somehow got buried, or if they intentionally buried it. But anyways, 130 is, and I show all these sites to give you an idea of where the Neanderthals were, these little red dots. They like to move around. There actually was a couple different branches of Neanderthals. So it wasn't like it was all one clan, it's like a couple different clans. There's at least two, like east and west. But if you see that way over there in Siberia all by itself, in the Soviet cave, they're living out, and they came from here and went all over there. Not all of them, but there's definitely DNA got moved that way. North Israel is 120,000 years ago, and there was a Neanderthal buried of a female, and the material remains in the upper strata of the cave is the mountain steering technology and small flint tools made of flakes. And very interesting because later, humans copied that same technology. So my question is, did Neanderthals teach us primal religion? Or at least the concepts of burial, possibly even thoughts of afterlife? And I think that this could be evident also at that cave with other burials. So this is my idea that probably the first atheist happened when the first person told them, hey, this is something amazing, and they just said, I don't believe you. And so that's why my thing is, basically, it's an African and a Neanderthal, the dead Neanderthal, and the Neanderthal is trying to teach the African religion. So he says, look, it's the Lord of Light, the Great Spirit, as some say, is my eternal guiding fire in the sky. And the African looks at him and says, yeah, I don't believe you. So animism starts approximately 100,000 years ago in Africa. And up in the sky we have an afterlife, but we don't have any deities. It's just an afterlife. And as you see, afterlife is not limited to humans. Everything goes, it's alive in a sense. And of course, there could even be rocks up there because rocks are alive. You didn't know that? They're all animated. Everything is a spirit. The carpet is a spirit. So, primal religion, animism, about 100,000-year-old belief system. So it actually starts, or it looks like it starts in Israel, and then immediately leaves. Some of it has to do with climate change, because the climate starts to change. And in fact, I think climate change has a large effect on religion's both movement and its expressed behaviors. In other words, if you take a shamanist and you stick them in one place, you're going to have one kind of shamanism. In other words, like Native Americans, they all started with the same kind of similar behavior, but as they spread out to the Midwest, they were different than when they went to the coast of California, because you have the different kind of needs change. So the same thing when climate change, it affects the people. So in Africa, which I think relates to the stuff in Israel, and the DNA shows that everyone actually gets limited from all over Africa to actually southern Africa, which is where this stuff happens. Early animism, 100,000 to 74,000 years ago, in Border Cave, which is basically at the time a savanna woodland vegetation, and it implies that there was a lot of density, so it was probably a different climate than we kind of see now. So it was a burial of a 4 to 6 month old child. It was found in a pit with a personal adornment. It was a perforated shell. And some of the oldest beads made by humans from ostrich shells are also found in Border Cave at 42,000 years ago. So Some people call this art. I do not call this art. To me, this is the template for two things. One, art, later, and also writing. This is a kind of like, I see it as a magical, early kind of writing art, which to me, the early stuff was the same. It was all sort of like religious, and it was a way to express stuff. So what they found out, why it's broken down into different categories, is there actually was, in a sense, different advancements in how they did these carvings. So it evolves just like everything else evolves. So 77,000 years ago, in South Africa, are 49 intentionally perforated shell beads in clusters of 2 to 17. Similar wear patterns suggest they were strung together, and some beads holding red ochre inside them. Moreover, similar shell beads have also been found in caves in North Africa and in the Middle East, dating to 100,000 to 70,000 years ago. And this right here is a Neanderthal mask. Found in France at 75,600 years ago, and it has a piece of animal bone wedged in the hole to make a little face. Probably still like an ancestor totem of some kind, but it's getting more and more symbolic. So, was it just us? The origin of the modern mind 75,000 years ago? It doesn't look so. Thus, we need to rethink our ideas about the evolving mind of the Neanderthal skull. And is elongated in the back of a football. Modern human skull is more basket-like shape. And have been recorded in a basketball-like shape. Amazing, Neanderthal DNA and Europeans identified 2 Neanderthal gene variants linked to head shape. Also influence of birth organization. And evolution acting on the brain might have reshaped the skull. So 75,000 years ago, Neanderthals make tools they do not use. These happen to be clear crystal stone that's not even good as a tool. It doesn't make a very sharp edge, nor does it keep a good edge. So then they weren't used. I think they were just symbolic. That their use was probably, think about this. Here's a stone I can see through. That to me, if you didn't know any better, would be a magical stone. All our stones you can't see through. So I can see where, interesting though, they still made them into shapes, they just didn't use them. I think they're starting to use sacred stones. So this right here explains the dispersals from Africa and how all humans, in a sense, trace to us to one place. This right here, the other thing here, is showing more in detail all the different actual places they find artifacts for modern humans. So 75,000 to 70,000 years ago is a stone snake in Rhino Cave from South Africa. First evidence of worship. And it proves for us a varied sets of behavior patterns, which fits best with a ritualized type of behavior. And they were colorful, non-local stone tools that have been carefully and elaborately made than just to be, in a sense, offered to the snake. What they would do is basically burn them under the snake and ruin their stone tools they just made. Because that makes all kinds of sense. But I can see that it has to do with sacrifice. And that's a theme that all religions like to have too. You have to give up something of value. So they spend all this time and make this valuable stone tool just to ruin it for the snake. The thing I think the snake does is 2 things. And there's another whole thing in what they made these marks. I think they're scales, but I think also it could relate to the stars. Because they have a lot of shapes like this that they relate to stars and ancestors. The snake, 2 things. Number 1, the umbilical cord from a female, and thus life. And the fact that a snake sheds its skin, in the sense, death. And so, or rebirth, actually, death and rebirth. So the thought that our spirits go up and they're still alive, even though we died. So it has a dual meaning to me. 74,000 years ago, border cave, South Africa, burial, like I already showed you, and there's some other items. Oops. This right here is 73,000 years old example, and they believe it has to do with possible like a larger piece of art or symbolic, expression that got broken. This is only chip left, but the pieces are obviously colors going to the edges. It must have been bigger. But this is what I call the first art. This is the Neanderthals. Once again, dang, they beat us again. And I think, did Neanderthals help inspire Totemism? Because the art dating to 65,000 years ago, at least in Spain, seems to then later be copied by Totemists, including all the way down to Indonesia. So, and if you notice too, they have those dots again. I think that the dots relate to stars. I think the hands also relate to ancestors and stars, because this is a star, in a sense, your hand. And you'll see sometimes they put multiple hands, like a whole wall of hands all real close together. Some people used to think it just had to do with like signing your work. No. They have ones where they have a whole wall. It's all it is just hands, tons of them real close together. And so I think like a star like shines. I think that, and then it's also saying I am a ancestor or a person. And like I said, I think those dots relate to that. I don't know exactly what that all this stuff means. Some of those look like animals. This could be an animal chasing other animals, running. But anyways, you see that they're starting to get more symbolic than just a few lines. They're really putting a little more effort into what they're doing. I don't understand all of it, but it certainly is meaning something. So 65,000 years ago, Kenya, we get more beads and red ochre modified. 60,000 years ago, South Africa, we start to get different patterns of designs. Probably different clans, could be, or it could be individual artists are doing it different, but they seem to be a similar type for a more use. And these are actually probably done on water containers, because they would take the whole ostrich egg, put water and bury it in the ground. Make a little hole in it and then fill it up with water so they can come and get it later, store water. And so they would put the marks on it, because this is our egg, our clan's egg, probably. But I think this also is getting close to the totemistic clan mentality, the us and them. So 50,000 years ago, you have totemism, and totemism gets a little more advanced than the animistic spirit world before them. And you can see even the animals, to me, get a little more aggressive. The human's importance gets a little bit less, and the animals a little bit bigger, but they're, in a sense, not as tame in a sense as the animists see the world. It starts to be a little more like the same us and them, but us and the animals. Although totemists do see the possibility for a human to have an ancestor that is a plant, or an ancestor that is an animal, as a direct ancestor. They think we now know that's nonsense, but I mean, they thought in this, or think that in a sense you can have genetically or some kind of a deep connection to you. And I think that's where you get the astrology, because they're already thinking up there means ancestors. And you already have totemists that think that animals can be our ancestors or relate to us. And so it's not that hard to put it together. Beyond even seeing patterns, just the stars in general are seen as that. So but I also think that that little thing right here is the future God, or deities. It's just starting to realize, like I said, if your clan's too big, you can't just have a family personal ancestor. You have to have more like our hero. That's, Abraham Lincoln or whatever. That's our hero. That's someone from the past we all feel like, in the sense, we're connected to. Which I think later becomes even more removed and becomes deified. So progressed organized religion about 50,000 years ago. And this marks a tradition, of early prehistory with evidence of increasing burials. And then increasing burials with grave goods. And the appearance of more anthropomorphic type of images. And cave arts, which once again, caves probably were seen as like a pseudo-womb going into the belly of the earth or whatever. But the earliest burial practice especially ones in Europe and stuff, were more varied. So it's not like everything is uniform yet. Everyone's trying stuff. It's like they have a simple template of an idea, and they all kind of do their own thing because, hey, who's going to tell you not to? And so 50,000 years ago, we have evidence of Neanderthals hunting, cave bears. And I think that this is important too because a lot of, bear worship, is attached to these type of symbolic behaviors. People are going in intentionally. Taking down a bear would not have been an easy thing. It would take a clan. So the point is you're starting to get group behaviors. So the oldest headband, or tiara, is about 50,000 years ago. Or it could have been used in another way, but most likely it's used in this way. But it could have been an expression of family, clan, tribe. And to me, these are definitely leading all these kind of totemistic behaviors. And this was done by the Decennians. So 50,000 to 40,000 years ago, we're seeing the emergence of variations relating to what I think is totemistic culture influenced behavior of taboo beliefs, which to me relates to the genetic evidence of possible moral disgust, with genetics showing that after 40,000 years ago, there is an extreme lowering in incest behaviors. Also coinciding with the emergence of more complex art, figurines, and personal adornments around 50 to 40,000 years ago. All of this and more is more confirming evidence of my thought that Totemism's emergence is about 50,000. So Neanderthal has their own version of Totemism for about 10,000 years, which takes from the what they already have, because they are already 160 was the oldest use of these eagle talons, and they also seem to like black feathers probably. And I have the one on the corner because I think this stuff relates, like I said, to sky burials before, and also like the idea of spirit in general means like breath. And so that's why I have, like, she's going to blow into the beak of the bird as a way to, like, get its spirit. So this is the Neanderthal cave in Siberia. And there's some jewelry that's ostrich eggshells between 50 to 45,000 years ago. 22 artifact layers back from 125 into possibly 180,000 years ago. And then this stuff is attributed to the Neanderthals living in the cave. And then the anti-Neanderthals are estimated at living there as another version of Neanderthal. It's from 120 to 100,000. And this is also when we met our ancient ancestors met the Neanderthals and mated. But the symbolic behavior is not limited. That cave has got all kinds of stuff going on. So you have things like the Soviets probably made. Around 90,000 years ago, there's a half also Neanderthal and half the Soviet child or person. And besides tools, they're also found decorative objects on bones, mammoth tusks, animal teeth, ostrich eggshell, drilled and polished holes of 40,000-year-old green bracelet. There's a tiara. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. Also, the oldest sewing needle from a bird bone. Once again, kind of makes me think of the sky burials. So this is like when we finally show up, the modern humans. And some people will call these Cro-Magnon. I don't use that word because that basically just means early Europeans. But to me, they didn't just stay in that one area. This is more accurate to the organization culture of 46,000, could be even 47, to 35,000 years ago. And it's totemism for basically modern humans. And I think that it relates to the pre-agrarian stuff that the Neanderthals were already doing. So lot of people talk about like the modified skulls from Peru and stuff, but actually the oldest modified skull, once again, dang it, those Neanderthals beat us again. So the skull reference a 45,000-year-old modified Neanderthal skull. This is the first evidence of possible modification, which could be ritualistic in nature. I think it is totemism. This is not made from modern humans, but rather it's our ancestor, the Neanderthals, or I would say our partial ancestor, because some people don't. It's not a direct, but most people not African have some amount of Neanderthal in them. And so while now it's not a full ancestor, still many modern humans carry the Neanderthal genes. The contribution from the Neanderthals to our genome is modest, and yet it may have proved to be vitally important for many modern humans. And so there was actually 2 skulls modified, not just one. It was it's important too, because if it was just one, could have been an accident, could have been, but the fact that there's more than one, it starts to be a little more evidence. So the other thing too is, once again, those dang Neanderthals, they built the first bone shelters. So the mammoth bone shelter dwellings are from 44,000 to 14,000 years ago. And then the map shows where they're at. The star is where the Neanderthal first one was. All those other ones are the modern human. And you see how close they are. It must have been a coincidence. So, and that's why I like to see things in context, because if I just said this, oh, well, it could have happened. Yeah, but it all happens almost in the same area the whole time. And that's all of the ones that are made practically. There's a few other ones that are outside of that, but the majority is almost exclusively in the area that would have had almost direct connection to possibly that thing. So did they see it and then copied it, or did they get shown? So this right here shows you a quick reference of basically all the art to show you that there's definitely groupings. And you can see where totemism, I say, comes from. It has tons of it. Most of the art actually is all in that area. So, it's just to give you, and then this talks about the cultures. These are different cultures. This is at the totemism. This is shamanism. This is like a sort of a shamanist, totemist, almost paganist. I think paganist comes from this, in a sense. It leads to, I should say. And so this is some more art. These are, they believe, probably seals. I think the lines, just like the round dots, probably have to do with the stars, not just the art. They're doing symbolic behaviors. And this is from Spain. So the oldest pendant is 43,000 years ago from Russia. And it's made from a fossilized ancient squid that was not alive. It was just like to them probably just a weird looking rock. So this gives you a real quick thing of the organization art, and it's basically the totemistic art. And you can see that they definitely see here's the dots, the stars, and so this right here is like probably I think that probably like a placenta or something to do with birth. Then now these are people also call this a goddess figure. I also do not think that is. I think it's more evolved than just the older 300,000-year-old rocks, which are just probably stones. This probably is more like a clan ancestor, like a great-grandmother kind of a thing. Because to me, this is starting to use, in the totemistic way, I believe, the ancestors' representation of power. When I wear this, I'm protected by, my great-grandmother. So, and you already see that there's a female with horns. And to me, this represents, just like all the animals that have horns, later, for sure, shamanism sees animals with horns or whatever as being related to stars. They call them star animals. That everything with a horn. And including like tusks from a boar, anything like that. I don't know about the elephant trunk itself, probably just the elephant tusks, which they made a lot of artifacts out of. But that one right there relates to the bull. The bull also relates to the moon. Also relates to fertility. And as it gets younger, closer to 30,000 when there's shamanism beginning, then you start to see that they advance a little more. So this is for 43 to 41,000 years old in Turkey. And again, this is notched probably to string it on something. And it's a eagle talon. So this is Neanderthals making art. Once again, a bunch of dots, which I think relates to the stars. It's 40,800 from Spain. And it does seem that spirit animals and stuff like that relating to possibly later into deities is about 12,000. This right here shows you the culture, shows you the DNA that it relates to. So this helps you understand that the totemists and shamanists are actually the same, sort of thing, even though the culture is different. They're carrying some of the similar DNA, although there are different DNAs also. So they're different things, but they do share some common stuff. And then you see them changing as they go. But the whole point is that who the culture is, DNA does seem to relate to how they express the religion a little bit different. So this is the bracelet, and they believe it was probably used in sacred ritual type of thing, and it's green. And this artifact is about 40,000 years ago, but they say the estimates it could even range up to 70,000 years ago. And it was broken, highly polished, dark green, and it's believed to have been made by the descendants of Soviets. And it seems that they had drilled a hole, which seems like a feat. They have a 40,000-year-old cave art in Indonesia. And once again, they're not doing it totally, filled, although this cave, it could be that some of the paint is flaked off. So either they did it intentionally, like the dots, or it could have actually looked better than 40,000 years ago. Now some of this art, like especially the hands, they're using their mouth. They put it in their mouth dry, and then they spit it. And I think that relates to both the sky burials and the belief in spirits. The belief that our breath is like an entity, because if I hold my hand over your breath and it can't come back in, you die. Well, that's what they thought happened. We obviously know that's not really how breath works. But it's not a spirit that comes out. Just like I say, Gesundheit, when you sneeze, thinking that your spirit's coming out of your mouth, and thank goodness it came back. So, but anyways, this is just a superstitious thing, but I think it attaches to when they're, in a sense, they're making magic. They're putting their spirit with the rock onto the thing and making some art. So, you have Totemism in Indonesia at 40,000 to 22,000 years ago. And the hand in the corner is 39,900 years old. And I think it relates to either Totemism or Animism. And it also may refer to, like I told you before, star spirits or ancestors. So we have more artifacts. Around 40,000 to 35,000 is remains from Neanderthals. And then we have the early Totemism, and it's 40,000 years ago. And the first was called the Lion Man, but then they weren't sure is that a cubic triangle, or is that a phallus? Now they don't say that. They just call it an anthropomorphic figure. But my point would still be that people need to understand that, like someone said to me, Damien, you said the first expression of a male god was 7,000 years ago. But there is, a half man, half lion thing that is much older. Well, this is what they're talking about, and it's not half anything. It's supposed to be in a sense, anthropomorphic. But is it a man? I don't think we can totally say that. So my response is yes, there is animals and women that are worshipped in a sense as deities around or before 12,000 years ago. And the other things that to me are clan totems, not gods. Female figures, though, go back about 300,000 years ago, but I think they're just ancestor worship. And at the emergence of agriculture, around 12,000 years ago, is female fertility goddess and her animals. Generally 3 animals, but there's a couple more, but I'll just give you 3 and explain what it means. So her animals would be like a bird, relating to sky burials, or taking the spirits up. Snakes relating to birth, the umbilical cord, and death, rebirth. Snakes shed their skin and still could be alive. And then bulls relating to both the moon afterlife as well as stars, and some type of thoughts on ancestors. Also, it relates to fertility in the sense that they thought that the thunderstorms were like bulls, mad or running. And so, in a sense, the thunderstorms and the bringing of rain, which they thought probably was semen from the bull, would then fertilize the ground goddess in a sense. And so, it's the fertilization that later the male gods, I believe, begin about 7,000 years ago. And it's due to threats of violence and things that were turned into from like clan leader cult or a hunting cult and mixing into a warrior cult, which also probably had a clan leader, which later then probably became things like kings. So your male god is ridiculous. If there was a male god, what was he waiting for? Because evidence certainly is female, female, female. Where is your male if there is a male god? Now, I don't believe in any god. I'm just making a ridiculous joke that if there was one, it's certainly, if you just look at the archaeology, I don't know how you think it's a male. So, this is the engravings, and you see there's multiple things that have to do with the dot. And like I said, I think this relates to the stars, the ancestors. And this again is ritual, showing the lines on him. And then this is the back side of it. It has a bunch of little marks. And like other agrarian cultural items, such as the Lion Man or whatever that I showed you, the figurine from Germany, and which is from 43 to 28,000 years old. This statue, or thing, figurine, whatever, is about 32 to 38,000 years ago, with a whole bunch of notches. They think that the notches could have a special meaning, possibly days of pregnancy, number of days for Orion's stars. Don't know, but I would say definitely it probably relates to or links to human fertility in the spirit star sky. So, totemistic hunting cults at around 37,500 to a 32,000-year-old bison skull, and done in a ritualistic way, probably trophy. And then we have some totemistic cave art, and that one thing in the corner is what this is representing, that little tiny piece and all the animals. If you look at it, to me, it's like the animals almost come from there. And the cubic triangle was made first, it's older, and then the bull and the lion were added as the legs. And I think it's very interesting that, in a sense, like the female representation, great mother or whatever, and then the animals are connected directly to it. So it's already showing, to me, that right before shamanism, because it's already like utilizing spirits, or what it looks like to me. This is 35,000 to 30,000 years ago. Whole bead cap was made and the person put in the grave, and then that's red ochre all on the head. Speaking of beads, going crazy in early shamanism, they done buck wild and just went all out for the beads. Imagine making all those beads and just burying them in the ground. They had to do all those by hand. I think it's absolutely amazing the effort that religion will go to just to waste things. And then the fact that this burial being put head to head as children, and then the items that they're buried with, like they're being passed off to the afterlife. And then these spears and hunting things to protect them, along with food. So this right here is the oldest They believe moon sort of chart, like what the moon's doing, phases, also relating probably to fertility. So they consider it, even NASA, it's considered to be the oldest lunar calendar, and it speaks of human awareness in a sense, or an observation and care about the stars, the heavens. And to me, it's also, like I've already said before, has to do with the ancestors, as well as it could reference fertility cult, which dates to this Argarian culture of Europe around 47,000 to 26,000 years ago. This early culture produced some of the earliest known cave art, pendants, bracelets, beads, and figurines. These totemistic astronomers made records of, it seems, lunar calendars, signs, and set marks into animal bone on occasionally on cave walls. Some of the oldest lunar calendars and seeming understanding possibly of mathematical sets that relate to the moon's or the moon's cycle, eclipses, solar solstice, seasonal changes of the earth. These beliefs seem to start in Totemism, which begins, like I said, around 50,000 years ago in Europe and is transferred then or adapted by shamanists starting about 30,000 years ago, and then paganists uses also similar, because you see these are different items in different cultures. Around 12,000 years ago. I think all this, though, relates to moon phases and stuff and stars. This right here is about 6,000 years old, and it relates to pictographs in Siberia that the shamans made to show star animals, like I was talking about before, how that their horns are seen as stars. And this right here is probably sun, but sun, stars, sun is a day star in a sense, and then even the moon probably was seen as something close to a star, like a night star along with the other stars. So this is a early religion 30,000 years ago, and it's the dancing figure, what they believe. And so it more than likely has to do with shamanism, because shamanism does rituals to make things happen, and so this is probably connected to that, and probably also rituals to believe in the spirit-filled life and afterlife. Here's the representation of the earliest shaman from 31,000 to 20,000 in the Czech Republic, and this head is actually believed to be a representation of the shaman. Once again, though, interesting, one eye open, one eye closed. Or, another thing possible, that the woman had a disfigured or blind eye from some injury. Interesting enough that shamans often think that a person has to be blind or has to have gone through some sickness or almost death to be a shaman. It's like a way of passage into, because when you can't see in this life, they thought you could see in the other one. So this goes to show the lingering or emerging bear figures, and probably some sort of a bear worship cult. So shamanism, you start to see their heaven starts a little different than the other ones. They're starting to make the human a little less important, and even the animals less important. But they're starting to get more symbolic ideas of representations of things, like the Great Spirit. They don't really have a total fix on what that is exactly. It's like you would try to say what a Christian would see as a god. But they're certainly on the path to get there. So this is, I think, is very interesting. These are a couple figurines. And they're about 30,000 and under. The one right here with the, I think it's 22 with the, I think is possibly the earliest form of sexual slavery. Possibly. The fact that they're found bound. Now, or the bound could represent their controlling nature. But I think it's probably the other way around. This is sky burial. We're putting the burials up, and Native Americans do this too, putting them up in trees. So this could be also a sacred tree. When people understand that some of the ancient people thought our own bone structure is a sacred tree. In a sense, the tree of life. We are the tree of life. So then we have more symbolic behavior. and ritualistically way of burying the dead. This is a triple burial. And they used to think that it was 2 men and a female. It's actually 3 guys. Interestingly though, there's red ochre in his hand in the person's crotch. Now, there is some genetic evidence that that person in the middle may not have been a standard male, maybe a hermaphrodite or something like that. Now once again, to a shamanism, things that are different are a good thing. Same with Hindu, like when a kid's born with like weird arms, leg, is a good thing. So the concept that we have today, we can't value judge how they thought. It's definitely different. So that may have been the shaman, the sacred person, and then people that either died or were executed to help them or protect them. So when did writing happen? Well, the appearance of 26 stone symbols, in a sense, appear in French sites first, starting about 25,000 years ago to 13,000 years ago. And again, it also finding these the same symbols a lot of parts of the world. So there probably was an initial, where I said totemism, and then a dispersal of, as they went, carrying these already pre-existing ideas. So a lot of people think of the boomerang, and they think, yeah, that's from Australia. Well, not really. It wasn't first from there. So the non-returning boomerang used as a weapon, or even probably a sacred stick, was probably invented at least 25,000, possibly as much as 50,000 years ago. The oldest boomerang discovered in Poland is 20,000 years ago. Now, so when was the oldest boomerang found in Australia? 12,000 years ago. But it was a returning boomerang, or what they call a real boomerang. So then you have this culture right here. This culture is the one that basically makes, in a sense, or genetically connects to all Native Americans. So this is where all that comes from. And it already starts with the shamanistic behavior. I see the snakes, and then the little figurines tying into the clothes, or maybe wearing on the neck. And they're already doing extreme designs on platelets. And some of these platelets might have been like attached, like a brooch, like it is in that picture. So this gives you an idea when I think that some of the stuff that was basically totemism and shamanism ends up in Australia, came from the Asians bringing it. So I think basically totemism starts in Europe. Europeans give it to the Asians by way of Siberia, and then those people genetically do end up in Malaysia and Indonesia and East Timor, and then little boats show art going over, probably what that represents, over into Australia. After that point, there's really no more real deep connection with Australia and the rest of the people. But it definitely shows. So it's interesting though that the art, the oldest art in a sense that's not this dynamic, is about 40,000 years ago in Australia. But this kind of art is like about 20 to 30,000 years ago. Although most of the Bradshaw art could be sometimes even younger. So this right here shows a woman and holding a bullhorn, once again to be connects to the moon and fertility. And then the horn has lines. So it's 25,000 years ago. And I think this does relate to the later goddess, although this is not a goddess. And relates to the bull cults that are later at Kazluk, which is the oldest, or Chagahoyuk, I should say, the oldest, in a sense, religious city in the world. So this is a reconstruction scene of shamans in France, showing you their religious behavior. So a lot of people think of people are cave people. No, they lived in houses. They went to caves to worship. So this is slash paintings from Australia dating to 19,000 years ago, showing this kind of a shamanistic representation and dance. This right here, I think, could represent a totemistic reincarnation scene, or shamanistic. It's from France, and because it looks like there's a bird head, and his phallic is a horn. So it's showing these things are connected. And then it's going down, and it's entering here first that becomes the person. It's like reincarnation. I think this right here possibly could be like it's birthing it. Birthing it, goes to the store, goes to the human, and then back. But certainly this is showing some advancing the religious ideas. This to me leads to the later goddesses. The sitting figure right here, I don't think this is a goddess, but I think this is what they come from in a sense. So it's about 15,000 years ago in France. Although this style of figurine generally is about 17,000 to 12,000 years ago. 12,000 being when I say paganism begins. Like I said, this does have, to me, something to do with that. This right here shows you the phase of the moon. Also, to me, the becoming goddesses that relate to the phase of the moon. So the arms up and stuff would be the one bull, and then the fat one is like the full moon, and then the skinny other one there is like the death. So like birth, life and death. So this shows you right here, even through time, from 14,000 all the way to 1692, there's a common theme in shamanism. Showing that even though they're not all completely the same, their symbolic ideas are definitely have a connected source. This right here is also not a god. This is a clan leader totem. And I do think this is the beginning of the clan leader cult, which then becomes later the kings. So this right here is 13,500 years ago. And it also has eyes that put in. I think the chevrons have to do with power, and holding his genitals is also a form of saying power. So this right here, location of the first tower structures, and they were, in a sense, towers, like I think 3 or 4 of them. Why? One would have done, and why do you even need one? To make both of them, and multiple of them, in a very close area with absolutely no reason. It's not like it was military. War doesn't start till 10,000. This is from 13,000 to 11,650. There's no real war. So to have these multiple things, it just doesn't make sense. Probably had a religious thing. Once again, I think probably still relates because it's still kind of shamanism before the 12,000. I think it's basically sky barrels. They're building large towers and they're putting white people on them so they can be taken. So this shows paganism. In early paganism had a lot to do with alcohol. They're making some brew. You gotta get drunk, man. I mean, that's how else do you get to God? Get a good hangover. So the person becomes a little bit more important than they before. There's more focus on the individual, but also there's a whole bunch of these new spirits and like beings and stuff that supernatural believed beings. So 12,000 years ago, a tomb in northern Israel contained a skeleton of a 15-year-old woman next to a puppy. They were buried together in a symbolic way. Then, also 12,000 years ago, in Israel, this is also considered to be a shamanist burial. And the tortoise shells do relate to shaman. They think that the tortoise, in a sense, go to the underworld and yet come back alive. Which if humans go in the water and for a while, they don't come back. And then the feather is the sky barrel. You start to see that in fact, they even take the shells, they'll put like rocks or stuff and make rattles out of them because they think that the spirits then hear them. And they're using a thing that it can go through more than one world. That's like the same with the Christians. When they think that you're baptized, you go down, you come back, reborn, wow, there you are! You disappeared, you died. So that's the underworld, in a sense. So a lot of people think of swastikas now as something that has to do with the Nazis. No. This is a very old thing. And this has to do at least starting 12,000 years ago. So it definitely even more so by 8,000 years ago. So this is from about 13,000 to 9,370. And I think these things in the middle probably had like sticks across them so they can become sky barrels. And sky barrels on these things are made like ancestors, so I think it's relating to the same stuff. So because to me, this is right when shamanism becomes paganism. So it's still very shamanist paganism. Later it loses some of that, but it's very heavy shamanism right now at the beginning. This right here is once again the bull and the stars, a 12,000-year-old glyph, and it probably relates that same kind of ideas as that other 25,000-year-old holding the bullhorn. These right here relate to the ancestor cult to me. I mean the clan leader cult. And to me, it's at the first human-made temple. And we can see that they're making more emphasis. And if you notice the nose and face, it's a similar theme that happens. This is another thing too. They started decorating or cutting their genitals. Probably still relates to the hunting and clan leader cult kind of stuff, because they could do something that, in a sense, women didn't have. And they also to sacrifice, even in the mines, they would cut their genitals. It says that blood is the most sacred blood. So I'm not exactly sure that they thought that, but it's similar ideas. It's not like it originated out of nowhere. So this is showing the same goddesses that they come because of our culture. And that right there is 11,500 to 11,000. It's one of the oldest gods. And interesting too is, that's in the sense that the first one in that kind of a position. A lot of the ones before are just standing, even have it sitting, but having it like either it's given birth or you know, it's available to have sex or there's something a little bit different. I think this is also when you get the split of women, where you have two kind of versions. You have, like, in a sense, the pure good and then the sexual, you know, powerful. Because it wasn't like it was directly bad, it was like warrior. So, you know, in a sense, war and then love. So this right here shows you the sitting deities, because the sitting deities have a great effect on relating to, like I showed you, the sitting behavior has to do with giving birth. And these are all, in a sense, birth goddesses. And you can see, once again, they're kind of centralized in where they're at. And they have a similar thing through time, that they're not, you know, the similar theme with this position. So, and I think it relates to Totemism, the fact that people started staying in one place and started making, so they were making crops, staying in one place. Once you do that, then you really need that crop to work. You have this new thing of fear that you never had before, because if there wasn't use left, now you don't leave. Now if that dies, you're going to have to die. So it changes everything. Everything happens in our culture in Semitism. You actually get more kids, because people that are on the move, hunter-gatherers, have a lot fewer children because it's this movement. And all probably the hard extremes in the body probably affects the female reproduction also. And then the changing of food. I mean, you eat different foods, it does affect, and how you eat the foods can affect stuff. So I think it's very interesting. So this, again, is a clan leader totem pole. And if you look, there's multiple faces on the figure. And I think that those relates, once again, it's not just one thing. It's like this relates to all of us. It's our ancestor or clan totem. And this is from Russia, and it's 11,000 years old. And the face is not that different than those other faces at 12,000 that were found in Turkey. Or these faces that were found in Turkey that are 10,400 years ago that probably also relate to that clan leader cult. And this right here is probably a mother goddess kind of a thing, 10,000 years ago. And you can see there's a hole in the arms, like she's in a place to where she can give birth. So this right here helps to show that how, in a sense, paganism left and the people left Turkey and how they moved into Europe. It wasn't one wave of expansion, it's basically two different ones, a land route and a sea route. The sea route actually got a lot further. So DNA reflects a westward movement of people from the Near East 9,000 years ago, especially from Turkey, spreading early paganism as it went, leapfrogging on the ocean thing, from island to island across the northern Mediterranean. And the Neolithic people were able to thus quickly spread their farming lifestyle across Europe. And the genetics suggest this. So it seems that after individuals in the Near East developed farming around 12,000 years ago, seemingly almost the same time that goddesses are invented, and they relate to a transfer of this new agricultural religion, or early paganism. So the genetics express people from the Near East into Turkey, and then rapidly through that to the islands of Greece, Sicily, making their way north to the center of the continent. People living in central Turkey today, for example, share DNA with the Sicilians and the Palestinians. But Sicilians and Palestinians have mutations, and the two populations are not common. People have common ancestral roots, though, to Turkey, but have not much contact since. People even living around the Mediterranean today have common ancestors in Turkey, but then the genes diverge into major groups. So this has to relate to, just so you get an idea, modern-day Egyptians, Libyans, Tuscanians, Moroccans also. So, and even though they're separate in a sense genetic branches, thus distinct paths, lacking much genetic mingling once they separated from north and south, they still relate to Turkey, and thus the spread of paganism. However, there is some evidence that some of these Neolithic settlements are made in a sense in using volcanic glass they probably got from other islands, showing that they're, not only did they move and then stay there, they moved back and forth after they went there. This right here is one of the rooms from the earliest religious built city, where most of the houses have a temple in the house, probably like what we call a living room. So this is their, in a sense, living room. And if you notice, it's hard to see, this is a bear goddess giving birth to three, you know, because there's the three gods, right? So the Father, Son, Holy Ghost. But anyway, so it's giving birth to the in a sense, the bulls, showing that it relates. So you have the bird, the woman, and then you have, you know, bulls. So this is 9,500. By the way, all the rooms are a little bit different, but they all have a similar type of thing. So it's the first religious city from Turkey. This is part of what goes into Europe and some of the other areas, like Egypt. This is another representation, just to give you an idea of the variations they would do. And how it wasn't like they always did it exactly the same, but it's still, there's the bear goddesses again, and then bulls again. This right here is from the same city. I think this relates to the hunting cult. They're not just hunting, they're messing with the animals. And I think that the reason is to prove bravery. So you have them doing stuff like, you see that bear over here? He's pulling on its tail. And then over here you have, you know, another person jumping over the boar. And then you have down here this gigantic bull. You notice this person is really small, but there's a person on top, jumping on top of it. Up here. So it's the same thing. Like, and even in Crete, the Minoans show pictures of people leaping bulls. But, sorry, Minoans are actually also genetically from Turkey. And it's not a wonder, since they already were doing this behavior 9,000 years ago or whatever. So, another thing interesting too is, I think this represents two kinds of people mingling. Because if you notice, this person is light and dark. And then you have some people that are red, some people that are dark, some people that have different stuff. And they're wearing different clothes too. They're not, in a sense, not doing the same exact thing. But I still think it all kind of relates to the same behavior. That they're, you notice this is a male they're messing with. And see how it's pulling its tongue? So this is not like just hunting. This is absolutely abusing animals for the probably for the thing I'm tough. But this, I think, said later, this becomes a warrior cult. That bravery, I'm brave. It's that mixed with the clan leader cult, which becomes the king. So this is 9,000 years ago in Syria and relates to what's called the skull cult, which is a form of ancestor worship. This right here is turtle shells with little rocks or things made inside them. And then inside they have little signs on them. So that in a sense they're doing magicness kind of a thing. These are 8,600 years old. This right here is for sure is a goddess. And sitting on a throne. This is also copied multiple times because it's in a sense, major theme. Once again, to me, all this early stuff before organized religion, it's not like everyone copied the exact thing. But you see it as lions and a woman sitting, lions and a woman sitting, lions and a woman sitting. It's a central kind of theme. So this is, in a sense, the veiled goddess, they call it, which is like wearing a veil. And it's 8,000 years old, considered to be one of the oldest in Europe. This right here shows how they moved from Turkey and what time. And so that shows you how they passed, in a sense, these religious ideas at the same time. To 6,500 years ago. So it was pretty advanced at that point. There were a whole bunch of different styles. So to